Also note that we are recording this webinar and we'll share the recording shortly after. Thank you for joining us as we talk about family reunification and immigration options for Palestinians with family in Gaza. My name is Amriya Ahmed, and this event is being hosted by a group of attorneys and organizations, including the Arab Resource and Organizing Center in San Francisco. The Arab Resource and Organizing Center is a grassroots organizing community organization focused on local community organizing as well as education and advocacy about Palestine and Palestinian liberation. The Arab Resource and Organizing Center, also known as AROC, also houses a youth program, legal immigration services, and social services case support. Also supporting this initiative is ANAR, an Afghan community immigration justice organization that offers legal services and resources, community education, and advocacy for Afghan asylum seekers in the US and those seeking family reunification and refuge. With us tonight are 3 experienced immigration attorneys who will provide insight into immigration options that are available for Palestinians with family in Gaza or those who have been recently evacuated. First, we'll be hearing from Mandy Gennerman, who practiced immigration law since graduation in 2003. Within a year out of law school, she opened her solo practice dedicated to immigration law. She and fellow community attorneys saw a need to provide informative immigration services to the greater Madison, Wisconsin area, and she became the founding member of the Community Immigration Law Center, CILC. She transitioned her solo practice in 2021, becoming a partner at Pines Bach LLP. Her practice includes family-based petitions, adjustment of status applications, counselor processing cases, and removal of conditions, as well as humanitarian petitions, VAWA self-petitions, U visas, PPS, and DACA, naturalization applications, and removal defense. She advises on a range of immigration consequences as a result of criminal convictions. Mandy serves as a pro bono committee co-chair of Wisconsin's chapter of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA, where she promotes pro bono service among the immigration bar. I'll pass it to you, Mandy.
Thank you, Amriya, and thank you for, again, everybody joining us tonight. I can see participants at already 138, and so I know that we are reaching community, and that is truly the goal of tonight's presentation. The objectives that I hope to discuss briefly and provide some overview tonight are really addressing the family-based petitions and understanding what is available to families present in the United States, those who have been able to evacuate to Egypt, and those that are still in the territories and in Gaza specifically. I think one of the things that our goals are as well this evening is to really address that this is a changing landscape, and that while all of us have experience in multiple areas of immigration, what we are facing and what we are trying to address tonight is constantly moving, and we are trying to get as much information to you and the community as we have, and to recognize that that could change from day to day. So we appreciate your patience and your understanding, and we see all of your questions, and we know that these are very important matters, and every day is very important to you. So when we talk about family-based petitions, I just want to be real clear that immigration defines what is a family-based petition. When we talk about who can bring or sponsor a loved one, the immediate relative categories that we have to kind of look at as far as those that may have options right now out of Gaza are spouses, parents, and children of US citizens. Again, that is the nuclear family that USCIS has defined for an I-130 petition. And just to be understanding as well that just because a petition has been started or a family member is asked for a visa to be made available, it's just not a simple I-130 being approved and your family gets to leave Egypt or your family gets to leave Gaza. There's a second step upon an approval that requires what's called consular processing through the National Visa Center. In general, when we are practicing this area of law in the United States, not under a war type crisis, these can take several years. They can take a year and a half from start to finish. What we are trying to understand with the Department of State is under what conditions can we expedite? Under what situations can we get family members, again, who are in Gaza on the list, and we'll talk about that list, out of the territories and into Egypt to potentially process these types of matters. What is unclear from the Department of State is, again, how quickly these expedites can be adjudicated and what are the steps that may or may not be skipped to process visas. So again, when we talk about immediate relatives, we're talking about a very limited community that has this option and resource available. What is not available at this time are extended family, uncles, aunts, nephews, nieces. I feel like the number of questions I have seen pertaining to that dynamic of family, there's just not an immediate relative petition for that. There's not even a Form I-130 available to that distinct relationship. For siblings of US citizens, I think that's a large question that we have. Adult siblings, so a US citizen present in the United States has an adult sibling in Egypt now or in Gaza. To start an I-130 from start to finish, we're looking at 16 years, and that is designated by what's called the Visa Bulletin. And again, I don't want to overwhelm people with what it takes to be successful on these petitions. I just want you to understand that what are the options available, who can start a petition, and how can potentially, with the assistance of legal, with counsel, with congressional assistance, to get things expedited, to move families into a situation that, while not overnight, but with hopefully a few months of security, we can get families to the United States. One thing that the Department of State has indicated to us is that there is this unique subset of individuals experiencing the crisis right now in Gaza, where we have children under the age of 21 who are US citizens. Potentially their parents came to the US, studied, went back to Gaza. And so the children hold this status as US citizens, but their parents do not have status. It is our understanding that under that circumstance, those family members should be able to access the Department of State's crisis intake list and be able to have both parents put on the list, exit Gaza into Egypt along with siblings. Again, how this really happens and how quickly it happens and whether or not all family members are put on that list at the same time, that's some of the problems that we're seeing. And I think that some of our other panelists can address that as well today. We do have several links, and really the idea of these links are to help families understand that if I'm going to be filing for an immediate relative, what does that form look like? What sort of documents do I need to produce? And again, some of these documents include marriage certificates, birth certificates, identification documents, which again, in the circumstance when you have nothing left standing, how is it you have these documents with you? And so we recognize, again, that these are obstacles that the community is facing and loved ones are facing. And we are here to try to think collectively on how to respond for those circumstances. And again, try to understand what USCIS and what the Department of State and the NVC may or may not give us some grace on come these petitions. So that's what I'm here to share today. And I'll let the next panelist assist us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy, for providing us an overview and to help center our understanding of essential steps to take. I'd like to also remind our attendees that we do have interpretation provided tonight, and you can find the interpretation button on the bottom of the screen. It has a picture of a circular globe, and that will take you to the interpretation tab, where you will hear this presentation in Arabic. لو سمحتم إذا تحتاجوا مترجمة، في نقطة من تحت الصورة الآن يبين مترجمة وهو في صورة كبة. إذا تحتاجوا مترجمة تفضلوا، أو بيكون مترجمة في العربي لكم. بنستني بس دقيقة.
السلام عليكم، شكرا أمريا. معي. السلام عليكم جميعا، أنا اسمي طارق، أنا حكون المترجم اليوم للاجتماع هذا. إذا كنتم بحاجة ترجمة، الرجاء الكتابة في الشات لكي نعرف أنكم بحاجة ترجمة ولكي لا نترجم من دون سبب. وللدخول للترجمة، إذا كنتم على جهاز الكمبيوتر يوجد إشارة أو أيقونة الكرة الأرضية، الضغط على الكرة الأرضية ومن ثم اختيار اللغة العربية. أما إذا كنتم على الهاتف المحمول فالرجاء الذهاب إلى أقصى اليمين، هناك 3 نقاط أو كلمة مور، الضغط عليها ومن ثم اختيار الانتربريتيشن أو أيقونة الكرة الأرضية ومن ثم اختيار اللغة العربية. رجاء كتابة في الشات أنكم بحاجة ترجمة لكي نترجم. شكرا جميعا. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Tariq. I appreciate that. Now we'll hear from Van. Van El-Wardi has been a licensed attorney in the state of California since 1999 and represents clients in immigration matters in all 50 states. She also represents clients in immigration matters at a wide variety of U.S. embassies and consulates throughout the world. She is fluent in Arabic and English, and she's engaged as an activist and advocate of civil rights and human rights projects benefiting immigrants in the U.S. and internationally. In addition, she has made appearances on major media outlets as an activist, attorney, and expert throughout her legal career. Ms. El-Wardi has been a board member of the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee, as well as a chapter in Orange County. Some of her honors and recognition include a certificate of special congressional recognition issued by a U.S. House of Representatives and an achievement award for civil rights and civil liberties issued by the Palestinian American Women's Association of Southern California. Ben, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, marhaba. I have been invited to provide some information here on applicants or potential beneficiaries of options that would allow people to come to the United States without, can you hear me? Or yeah, okay, sorry. Yes, so discussing options for people who don't necessarily have family in the United States, as Mandy defined for us earlier, who don't have spouses who are citizens or parents who are citizens or children who are over the age of 21 to sponsor them with an I-130. Primarily, the petition that is available for people would be something called humanitarian parole. Humanitarian parole is one of the discretionary options that people may attempt to apply for. It is a benefit that would allow for temporary entry into the United States due to an emergency, due to an emergent or urgent circumstance, and a humanitarian reason. This petition is something that can be filed online through the USCIS website, and I think we'll be sharing the link to that form later on. And it can be issued for multiple reasons, one of which is medical treatment. That's something that many people do benefit from when they're coming to the United States for emergency medical treatment, some type of surgery or consultation. Also, in certain circumstances, children are allowed to use humanitarian parole to follow family members to the United States. And also there are other vulnerabilities that are addressed through humanitarian parole. So sometimes people with special needs are able to enter for services, other kinds of maybe age-related or living conditions. These are all circumstances that would allow people to request humanitarian parole. As I said earlier, this is a online petition. It can be filed with all of your supporting evidence, including medical documentation, identification documentation. But the problem is with humanitarian parole as it stands currently is that it is taking years, unfortunately, to process these applications. It is also something that it does not offer a permanent solution. It could be granted for a period of just 1 year in order to pursue whatever purpose it is that is required for the parole. And it's not easy to document. It's a discretionary benefit. And so really the decision is in the hands of the officer who is reviewing the case. There is also an element that is required, which is having someone basically sponsor you for financial needs. So you need to have someone who's not necessarily a family member. It doesn't even have to be a US citizen or a green card holder, but they do have to file an affidavit of support to show that they are able to provide you with some type of support while you are here so that you don't apply for a benefit from the United States government. In addition to this, I was also asked to discuss options or kind of uncertainties that are existing right now within these humanitarian options. One of our biggest concerns right now is people, and Mandy mentioned this earlier, is people who don't have access to the typical documents that are required to exit Gaza or hatta in different areas of Palestine, or even document their relationships to their family members. So maybe birth certificates, marriage certificates, passports, these are not available. We're currently asking questions to find out what flexibilities exist for people to document their relationships. But it is very important for people to, if you do have family in Palestine, to take pictures of whatever documents you can find, even family pictures, UNRWA cards, if possible, anything that you have that they can document in a picture and email out, text out, send out, so that later on, if those documents are not available, at least you have pictures of that relationship. But it is not clear at this point what kind of documents will be required for benefits being, issued through the embassy. Another idea or another method that people are trying to use to document medical issues or relationships is through written declarations. So, for example, if you have family who you may not be able to apply for through an I-130 or an immigrant visa, you may apply for potentially humanitarian parole and document the context, the circumstances with whatever medical documentation could be available, maybe pictures of prescription medications that are being taken. That can all be described in a written statement, including and also describing biological relationships. There are ways to document relationships that are considered secondary evidence. But in times of crisis like this, I don't even know if that's going to be something readily available to people. But written declarations signed are another method of documenting the circumstances. Just to kind of touch upon some other resources that have been discussed or posted on the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem's website for people who need emergency services, who are U.S. citizens, who are living in Palestine. They are saying that there are outreach visits that are happening throughout the West Bank right now. And that these are services that are available by appointment. And we're going to share a link for an appointment intake form. I'm not sure if anyone in the audience has experience with people having interviews or visits during these outreach appointments, but it would be really helpful to know in the chat or in the Q&A if people can share any experience with the U.S. Embassy and interaction with U.S. citizens, green card holders, or otherwise through these appointments. Finally, we are going to share also something called a reciprocity table, which is a list of documents that family members or people that that are seeking consular services or humanitarian parole can check and look to see what kind of documents might be required and start to find ways to secure those documents if possible. That's about it. That's all I have right now. And happy to answer any questions as we move through the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Van, for sharing your insight and knowledge and helping us to understand that there are problems within the system that need to be addressed. Lastly, we have Hassan Shamia. Hassan Shamia is an immigration attorney and partner at the law offices of Shamia and Turndian. Hassan Shamia began his legal career while at law school pursuing an internship with the International Criminal Court in The Hague, Netherlands. Attorney Hassan Shamia also served as a summer associate at an international law firm. Bay Area attorney Hassan Shamia and the Arab American Civil Rights League filed a lawsuit a week or so ago on behalf of two Palestinian American grandmothers who were trapped in Gaza. The lawsuit accused the U.S. State Department and Department of Defense of giving preferential treatment to U.S. citizens evacuating in Israel over Palestinian Americans trapped in Gaza. I will let Hassan share a little bit more about that lawsuit and its success.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all for joining. Great attendance. Before sharing a little bit more about the lawsuits, I want to reiterate something that Amanda had said earlier. And I'm going to speak slowly because they asked us to speak slower for the interpreters. The situation in Gaza and getting out your family members can be incredibly frustrating. And all of us on this panel sympathize and understand that frustration. There are moments where the rules, regulations, and procedures change quite literally overnight. And so just as you are confused, there are attorneys like Amanda, like Ben, like myself, who are constantly trying to keep up with the updated procedures and protocols, but nothing is clear. So when you feel confused, it is not just you. It is the lack of clarity that is coming from all aspects of the US government and so forth. So we ask that everybody is patient with the people they are working with, because just like you, they are trying to navigate this complex situation, especially when it comes to immigration. As Amriya mentioned, I was part of a team of nationwide attorneys that was led by the Arab American Civil Rights League out of Michigan, who brought lawsuits on behalf of US citizens who remain trapped in Gaza. And the basis of that lawsuit was that we were claiming the US government was treating Palestinian Americans differently as compared to Israeli Americans. Israeli Americans received a chartered Royal Caribbean cruise line for their evacuation, but Palestinian Americans remained stranded, told to go to a border that was closed, if not bombed. And so these lawsuits were aimed at putting pressure on the US government to evacuate these US citizens. I have some numbers that I'm happy to report. All of these lawsuits have since been dismissed because all of the plaintiffs who were part of these lawsuits have made it into the United States and have been evacuated. So there was a total of 58 plaintiffs, and of the lawsuits that were filed, they were withdrawn because they made it here, and the other ones that were pending the formation of the lawsuit, they have also made it back. But if anybody knows any US citizen who remains stuck in Gaza by choice, please reach out to me and I will connect them with the Arab American Civil Rights League to make sure that they get the proper representation for the person who represents their area. The Arab American Civil Rights League, the executive director, her name is Mariam, she's actually in the audience tonight. They will be launching an initiative for humanitarian parole, similar to what Ben was just speaking about. A lot of questions in the Q&A are about humanitarian parole. And the idea is humanitarian parole has not been adjudicated for Gazans yet. And the Arab American Civil Rights League will be compiling a list of information and of people who want to file for humanitarian parole, partnering them with attorneys nationwide to help facilitate the filing of these humanitarian parole requests and put pressure on USCIS to process those humanitarian parole applications rather quickly. And so please keep your eye out for these intake forms that will be going out to help process these humanitarian parole requests so that you, your family members can be put in touch with an attorney who will happily represent your family free of charge in these humanitarian parole requests. Now, I was asked to also speak about what happens if your family members do make it home, do make it to the United States from Palestine. What happens then? If some of your family members are lucky enough to get a B1, B2 visa, or are lucky enough to get humanitarian parole in the very near future, and they make it to the United States, a lot of people are facing issues at the port of entry, at the airport. There have been reports of people who've been evacuated, US citizens even, who've been pulled aside and have experienced secondary screening by the airport officials. Now, that secondary screening takes different forms. Some Border Patrol officials, CBP officials, are taking devices, cell phone devices of people and searching them. Some are asking for background checks and asking them about their entire family roster, from grandparents, siblings, parents, cousins. Other people have had, they were detained for hours on end, but eventually released in. If there is somebody with a visa who enters and who is experiencing difficulty entering the United States, or successfully enters the United States, and they're afraid to return to Gaza or to return to Palestine, they can apply for asylum. Asylum is something you apply for if you are facing persecution in your home country. And we know that everybody from Gaza right now is facing persecution. Now, there is also something called TPS, which stands for Temporary Protected Status. TPS is something the United States government designates to certain countries who are facing a time of civil unrest. When the Ukraine war broke out, TPS was given to Ukrainians. And so any Ukrainians who enter the United States could apply for TPS and seek protection and a work permit and authorized permission to be in the United States legally under this program. However, Gaza and Palestine have not been designated for TPS countries. So when you ask in the chat and in the Q&A, what can we do in addition to filing all these forms and calling our senators, we can also advocate for Gaza and Palestine to be designated as a country worthy of TPS, so that our brothers and sisters from Gaza and Palestine can be in the United States and seek this protection and seek a work permit and to be here lawfully, and then seek other alternatives as we go along. Congressional pressure is going to be really important, especially when it comes to the adjudication of these humanitarian parole requests in a quick manner. Because the idea of humanitarian parole is that these people can escape a situation that is dire quickly and make it to the United States. So if those applications are not adjudicated quickly, then that defeats the purpose. So the next steps for all of us here should include advocacy on our local and federal levels to our elected representatives to make sure that they know that the voters in their area, regardless of whether they are Palestinian or not, will hold them accountable and will put pressure on them to ensure that their constituents and the families of their constituents receive equal treatment when it comes to immigration policies as Ukrainians have. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hassan, for sharing about your successful litigation and advice for our community members as they make their way to the U.S. It gives us hope that we can successfully challenge the system and demand our recognition as equals and fair treatment under the law. A lot of you have submitted questions, and we'll be putting in the chat a link to a number of Google Forms, as well as for informational purposes, some links. We'll also be sharing that after the webinar. We hope this forum has been helpful. If you need more support or advice, a group of organizations and attorneys have come together to provide free legal advice for community members in need. In the chat, you will find a link to Google Forms that will help connect you to an attorney. However, our objective is not just to connect community members with attorneys, but to also advocate for Palestinian families to be reunited. We want this administration to take our immigration concerns seriously, especially in this moment with the utmost urgency. We hope to reach out to you in the next few days and ask you to help amplify our demands to this administration to move seriously and successfully to reunite our families. With that, we will open up to questions. And for our panelists, a lot of the questions ask about what options are available for families that are looking to reunite, but who are not the spouses or children or parents of a US citizen.
I can address that at this point. I mean, there are a lot of uncertainties as far as what options are available. One of those is the humanitarian parole program. As Ghassan mentioned earlier, humanitarian parole is discretionary, and it is something that is, possible to be implemented overnight, just like what happened with Ukraine. I mean, even humanitarian parole in the case of Ukraine was granted for 2-year periods of time. So when people come in, they're immediately given a work permit and allowed to stay in the United States for 2 years, when typically this is a 1-year program and then renewed. So that is one potential option to pursue. And I know that there's some advocacy work, as Ghassan shared with us earlier. Maybe we can put the name of the organization that's leading that effort in the chat for people to see. And that is really right now, that is one of the primary pushes, I think, for advocates is to get not only humanitarian parole applications to be reviewed, but then to be reviewed quickly, since it is taking years and that doesn't address the urgent need. And the other area of concern really is how to document people's identity. I think probably all of us on this panel have seen cases where people are literally escaping, really not thinking about bringing family, birth certificates or marriage certificates or pictures or anything with them. And how will those issues be resolved at the embassy during these interviews? How can we support petitions if we don't have evidence of identity? We need to get really creative with that. And it's going to come down to, I think written declarations. It's going to come down to potentially community leaders documenting relationships, photos of documents if possible. I'll leave it to the other panelists to offer other areas of relief.
Yeah, unfortunately, Ben, you hit it on the head that as frustrating as it may be, there are no other options at this moment in time as we speak on December 4th. There are no other options that us as attorneys have come across that are viable options. So that's why we are encouraging on this panel as a collective the push for humanitarian parole and the filing of these family petitions, and try to get those applications expedited. That's the goal, and that's the idea. That's going to give everybody the best chance at getting their family members out as quick as possible at this moment in time.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Another set of questions we have is about whether some or all of your advice also applies to lawful permanent residents or for folks who have green cards right now.
So I'm happy to address where the permanent resident situation falls into family-based petitions. So a permanent resident is allowed to apply for a spouse and for children, but it ends up getting into what we call the preference category, which again means there's nothing immediately available. And that is based on a designation that the government allows so many visas in different categories. For a while during COVID, we do know that spouses of permanent residents were considered current because, again, so there was such a lack of people moving forward through that process. But since things have sort of regulated, we've seen that bounce back again. And so permanent residents, again, spouses of permanent residents can be applied for through this process with an I-130. We are not, again, getting any information on allowances as to, even if we expedite these matters, that the visas will be made available. So again, not to dissuade applying, but to really recognize the obstacles when it comes to visa numbers available in those circumstances. And unfortunately, permanent residents cannot apply for their parents. So that is not even a class that is available when we talk about family-based petitions and I-130s. So I'll leave that there.
Thank you.
If I could add something, can I add something to that? So here's another angle, I guess, with that. Even in recognizing that maybe the numbers are not available for people who are green card holders sponsoring family, filing the I-130 gives you a receipt. And sometimes when you have a receipt, that might be something that can help compel, an officer to approve a humanitarian parole request or even a visa request, if potentially, if that's a potential. So at least you have something to connect you. And there is a potential future benefit that is on its way, although it may take time, but at least you have the evidence of a receipt. And sometimes I find that that's helpful. So.
That's a good point, Van. Thank you for adding that. And the other piece to that, where collectively our organizations are trying to get questions into the Department of State and USCIS, that is one of the questions. Is a receipt for these benefits enough to get you on that list to exit Gaza and enter Egypt? And we don't have an answer for that as of right now, whether or not receipts alone get you access to that list, unfortunately.
Thank you. The next question that we have, or set of questions, is about whether or not applications that are already pending are being expedited in this moment.
I can just tell you, just practically, again, those are not situations in which I have assisted families with the expedites. We've had conversations around it, but I am not, at this point, I cannot speak to expedited requests that I have made to give any time frame as to how long those are taking or if they're being acknowledged or not. But maybe some of the other panelists have things before the agencies with expedites.
Yes, I would say I do have some clients who we had I-130s pending earlier this year. And because of the circumstances, because of the violence that we're seeing and how random, not random, actually, I'm sorry, but like how widespread it is, I'm sorry. We have been able to expedite I-130s through the USCIS with just evidence of country conditions and like a written statement describing the dangers that family members are facing. But unfortunately, that's not enough. So the I-130 is expedited. We're also planning on, for step 2, as Mandy described earlier, the National Visa Center is the next agency that's going to be our target for an expedited processing. And there is a method, there's a process for that. The real problem is going to be getting the interview scheduled at the embassy, getting family members out of Gaza into Al-Qahira or in Cairo if possible for interviews. And really that's where I think the gray area is right now.
Thank you for sharing that. What we just did is submit on the chat a number of links as well as Google Forms to help community members and families connect with attorneys. If you are here and you need help reuniting with your family abroad, if you are in Gaza and you're looking for options on how to come to the US or what other options you have for reuniting with your family, feel free to connect and fill out the forms. We have volunteer attorneys nationwide who have come together to help answer your questions. You'll be provided with a consultation and then with any other advice and guidance that we can give. We are also considering opening up an option for fundraising, so that way we can try to help with fees. We also hope that you all will continue to keep track of organizations like AROC, so that way you can be informed about any new updates and advocacy from AROC, ORNAR, and a number of attorneys. We ask that you also please take care and have a wonderful night.